Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Making Hardstyle from Scratch. Today we are going to be looking at the mid-intro of the track, a little bit of the main drop, and discussing the atmosphere, certain elements in the track, how they came to be, and where we go from here. So let's get right into it. Last time we left off in a pretty early state where we had just really created an atmosphere, started creating a vibe. As you can see here, things have filled out a little bit more. I've definitely been working on this track in the meantime while producing other content. However, we are going to be going over what exactly it was that I did, my thought processes behind the elements that I've decided to put in here. We will recreate some things and kind of show how things were created in here. So let's get started. Hey guys, quick note in the editing process here. I discovered that the power outage mentioned later in this video did mess up a few of the recordings. So I just needed to re-record some of the parts where I was demonstrating audio directly from the DAW. So you might see some unnatural cuts here and there, but thanks for bearing with me on that and enjoy the video. The first thing that I'm going to do is just show you guys where the project is as it stands right now, and then we will start going over the elements within it. So here it is. So that's where we're at. Obviously, the melody that was slightly previewed towards the end of last episode is filled out a little bit more. Actually, some of the notes were corrected as some of my backing chords didn't initially have the correct notes. So those were fixed. Added a screechy element to the mid-intro, which is something that I really want to continue to develop over the course of this episode as well. So we will be taking a look at that. We can deep dive a little bit on the kick roll / percussion / rhythm stuff from the mid intro. And we will detail some of the other things. Like I said, my thought processes behind developing that original atmosphere and how it carried over to what we're calling the mid intro at this point. Now keep in mind, this is by no means a final structure. Wouldn't even call it necessarily a final sound design choice or anything on any particular element. This is, again, the Making Hardstyle from Scratch series. So the processes that you're going to see here along the way will include all of the mistakes, all of the failures, all of the trial and error, A being trying some elements taking them out and never using them again, or discovering something new on the spot that ends up making it into the final track. So yeah, we'll be kind of covering those processes. You will see the successes and pitfalls. So that's where we're at right now. And let's start taking a look at some of these things that we have going on here. So the first thing I want to focus on are the kicks here. If you remember from my Nimble Kick VST breakdown video, I demonstrated very cool ways to use Nimble Kick live in a project that would allow you to do some really cool creative things with kick drums. However, in this project, I've decided to go a little bit more traditional, just because I didn't foresee myself needing to be as wacky with MIDI and kick drums and playing with all that. Plus, for people just starting out, I think this more traditional-ish method is a good way to get started and a lot more visual for you to be able to grasp. So if you can see here, I've split the punch and the verb and the tail. And this comes from a previous kick project where in the project itself, I decided to specifically export the punch and the reverb connected to it, and then the tail separately. So that way I could put them in this project, layer them together as one kick drum, but then have more creative freedom over how I implemented those elements. So we'll listen to the kick drums here, paired with the percussion, so you can still kind of feel the rhythm and you can get an idea of what's going on in the mid intro of this track. All right, there you have it. So as you can see, lots of cool, fun rhythms. The kick pattern really repeats itself a lot so far. We've got the do going on a lot in there, which could be cool. It could stick around. It could go away. I'm not 100% sure yet. Just going to depend on where this track goes and what other elements we get in here. But we can go over how some of these are being created. So if I zoom in here, we can see we have our punch and the reverb. And then the tail individually. Easy enough. So, like I said, this allows us a little bit more creative freedom whenever we're doing kick rolls in between the patterns. I don't have to necessarily put the tail in there with the punch. One, because maybe the punch isn't even playing long enough to justify needing a tail. And two, it actually allows me room for other elements of the mixdown to come through. So whether it's part of this leads and melody group, whether it's vocals, whether it's snares that have like a kick layered under it for a little bit more depth, whatever it may be, other elements in the track need room to shine through. So not having that huge hardstyle tail playing during these quote unquote transitional moments or rhythmically different moments allows for those other elements to shine too. I can automate off certain EQ points, or I can dial back on the sidechain. So for these kick rolls, as you can see here, let's kind of break down what's happening. First of all, we can see that they're quieter in this buildup. This is the buildup to what is the drop here at bar 35. It's important to remember that kick drums are very upfront, big elements, right? I mean, it's the focal point of this kind of music. So when you have buildups, that lead up to a moment of release, you don't necessarily want the elements that are leading up to that to be as big and as powerful as the kick drum itself. So this is why during buildups you will find quieter kicks, you will find more automation. As you can see here, they do kind of ramp up in volume. And if I do take a look at here, I have an informational panel on my left-hand side that I do a lot of editing with. So if we can see the initial punch itself recorded out, I'm not modifying any gain here. So it's just 0 dB, the original sound of the sample. If I go here, we can see I've done -12, -11, -9, still again -9, -7, and again -7. So gradual increase in volume, but still even the punch right before the actual kick drum that hits is still -7. We're quieting this down quite a bit, but it's still very present. It's just something that adds that tension right before the drop where it's needed. Now, looking at these again, we can see that these first two that hit here, I've not changed the pitch. On the first two, so this one and this one, we've done a pitch up of 2 semitones. Actually, the first 3, 2 semitones. The fourth is 1 semitone up, and the last one is 2 semitones down. It's part of the game nowadays. Everyone pitches their punch samples. It used to be taboo back in the day, but you know, this is hardstyle in the 2020s. Apologies, folks. We love the Texas power grid. Briefly lost power during recording, but we're back. Everything's fine. Getting back to punches and their tonal qualities and their rhythmic qualities, you can see here that we are fading out a lot of these. If you see that, you know, if I extend this out, we've got the full punch there. But after listening and playing around with these a little bit more, the fade out creates a more natural percussion effect. I try to think of it as if, you know, a real drummer were playing these instruments. A real drummer wouldn't hit with the exact same amount of velocity identically every single time. The same theory applies to hardstyle kick drums and percussion in general. You want variation. You want things to sound natural and for tension to be able to be built and for the focus on certain elements to remain like the main big heavy kick drum that we have. We don't want other elements outshining that. So overall, I think personally, that's what makes good kick rolls, are the right pitches, the right velocities, the right volume, paired with percussion, paired with space for other elements to shine through. That's where we get a good kick pattern. Now, another element that we have here, as you can see, is this reverse verb. This is recorded straight out of the full kick drum, where the reverb itself was spliced out and put back in to the project. That way you can do things like what I'm doing here. As you can see, we have the punches playing as part of a kick roll, but still we have the reverb from the punch as a backing element. So this kind of keeps those kicks in a particular space. It keeps things sounding like they're in one area, which I think is a really important part of producing. is space creation and putting people in a place in a moment. And we can see what those sound like here. They sound really cool. Especially in moments like this, where you can see the reverb builds up into itself and then immediately goes again up into another kick pattern. These are more spatial audio tricks. Again, putting people in places. This is a cool way of adding that stereo reverb, big space, but at the same time taking it away from certain parts and then putting it right back in. Pulling people in and out of that is a really cool part of modern hardstyle, especially in the raw aspect. You get a lot of these quote unquote reverb tricks. I'll play this part back again for you. And so just really pay attention to what kind of effect that creates. One of my favorite things to do. It's the little details that matter like this when you're producing to really put those tracks where you want them. And finally, the last element that I have here is this ghost chain, which if you remember from my side chaining video, is the sort of intermediate method that I'm using for side chaining here. This ghost chain, of course, has no output. It is just simply a clap sound that I had that I put in here that follows the kick pattern. And this is the signal that I'm using to duck leads and other things behind the kick, rather than going with volume shaper or going some extremely complicated method. All I wanted was for the kicks to be able to punch through the mix, for the melody to duck a little bit for that spatial effect, but not too much. So this was an easy way for me to create that sidechain, which I'll be showing you here in a little bit. Now, if you would like to know more about creating kick patterns, kick rolls from scratch, the types of elements that you need, please leave me a comment down below and we can cover it in another video. For now, let's take a look at the vocals that we've added here in the track. They're very interesting. My friend and I in Unified Assault discovered these and immediately knew that they had to be part of a track, and I can play these for you now.
This ain't nothing to me. I'm a demon. I'm a demon. I'm a demon. This ain't nothing to me.
Some pretty cool vocals. Obviously, we're being a little bit funny with them, not taking ourselves too seriously. It's just the type of vocal that I think would fit really well in a track like this. The track itself isn't too dark or demonic or anything like that, but it's just a funny play on things. As well as this part here, you can see I've taken a little slice of the D consonant in the word demon and looped that very quickly, which can create that little glitch effect that you hear. Very cool effect. But yeah, the bulk of the work is coming from these plugins here. We've added a Fury distortion module. Good old Oxford inflator. Must have for any producer. Absolutely cranked. Also a must do. But this is the bread and butter right here. Nectar 3 is a one-stop shop where you can really do everything that you need to do to get vocals ready for a track. We're not doing anything in the pitch module. Under harmony, we have some duplicated voices. So panned all the way to the left is a voice that is -7. In the middle, we have a full octave down. And to the right, we have the -3. So if I actually turn this on and off, you can hear what this is doing to the vocal. So this would be the original vocal.
This ain't nothing to me. I'm a demon. I'm a demon.
And again, with the harmony on.
This ain't nothing to me. I'm a demon. I'm a demon.
So you can see it just adds those cool voices that make the track really unique, or make the vocal really unique, rather. But that is it for the vocals. Other than that, it's just slicing up, creating cool patterns, making sure that it rhythmically fits with the rest of the track, some structural things like that, choosing the right phrases to use. We can dive deeper into that another time, but for now we will look at the next thing. And moving on, let's finally cover the leads, melody, and other music we have going on in here. Again, this is the group that is being sidechained by our ghost chain sitting behind the kicks. So when I solo this still, you're going to hear some of the dipping effects from that sidechain signal. However, we're just not going to hear the kicks for the moment. So as you can see, a lot of instruments here, a lot of layers. I love using Viper. I love Sylenth. I love Serum. I love Spire. There's so many cool synths out there. I think they all have a place. They all have their particular sound. And when you combine them together, you just get some amazing results. For the choir here, I'm using Contact. And for the melody, if you remember from the end of last episode, and of course the main drop that I just showed you, we have a full choir melody that has the chords from the atmosphere we created. So when I talk about breaking that linear writing mold of starting from the left, going to the right, and building a track out that way, this is where not writing linearly really helps, because I've already developed this full chord structure here. And being able to take this, move it over to your mid intro like this. And then for this example, pretend I took my eraser tool and erased parts of it. Now I have a more simple and straightforward melody that fits into the mid intro a lot better. I'm not necessarily revealing the full chord structure or revealing the full melody, but I'm planting the seeds for what's to come later. And I think that's a really important part about making a good mid intro. It's the important part about making a good atmosphere in general. But at least the way I write music, I love to tease elements. I like to bring things in that are going to be fully revealed later in the track, so that you get the vibe, you get the atmosphere throughout the entire track. And for this, we've simplified it by simply pasting the full melody, erasing every other couple bars here, and you end up with this. Transitions into the full version. I think that sounds really great. Obviously, there's a lot going on with the reverb, delay, and some sidechaining going on there, so it's not going to sound like just the element itself, but this is a really important aspect of producing a good mid intro. Moving on, we have our spire elements here. These are new to the project. They haven't been incorporated into the full drop. They are simply cool elements that I felt drove the story of the track forward a little bit more. It's an element that is, again, putting this track in a certain space. It's modernizing it. You know, this mid intro isn't just kicks and screeches. It's got the choir. It's got the digital sounds. It's got the screech. It has a lot going on. So these are the elements that make it a lot going on. And it's my personal preference to have these types of things here. So I'll solo these so you can hear what they're doing. Very cool arpeggiating melody, which is again taken directly from the chords we created. It just goes to show that putting time and effort into creating really solid atmosphere can benefit the rest of the track, because then you're reusing these MIDIs. I've taken this, put it down here, you know, based on the sound set that you choose, you may raise an octave, you may lower an octave, you may add some harmonies here and there, but for the most part, you can get a lot done with what you've already created. So keep that in mind. It's not this overwhelming feat where you have to constantly reinvent the wheel every time you want to put an element in. Use what you've already created. Trust yourself, trust the process, and you will get some good results. Finally, a new element to the track is this screech created in Serum, which I will pull up here. What I'm calling the Demon Screech. You can take a look at basically what I have going on here. Nothing too complicated. Just some simple shapes. We've got a filter here and an envelope that affects the pitch of the screech. As you can see, it ramps up very quickly at the beginning and dips down. On the effects section, we're using tube distortion, driving the hell out of it, some reverb, chorus, and delay. This is an element that is going to develop over the course of this track, because what I really wanted to do was just get the initial sound that I like, which I believe I have achieved at this point. But what it really needs is more movement and creativity, and a way for me to make this screech speak. And that's going to require maybe some different MIDI notes. Maybe I'm duplicating the channel and making a different version of the screech, where instead of the pitch moving up at the beginning, maybe I have the pitch move down, or something of that nature. Something that's going to allow me to put more detail into this over time. For now, the screech is just right up front. There's not really a lead into it, but that is part of the goal, is to, one, get more control, two, to do something that I've done both with the kick rolls and with the vocal, and that is have a reversed reverb tail that is recorded out and put alongside this, so that you can have that reverb lead into the screech, lead out of it. You can, since that reverb will be an audio recording, you can have, you know, more control over the audio by erasing parts of it, creating trancy gate sounds. There's literally a million possibilities with something like this, but the important thing is that foundationally, the sound design is good. And that's it for the mid intro. We have our percussion channel here, which we did kind of cover in the last episode. But just to briefly look over this again, we have crashes. We have some rhythmic noise. We've got a hi-hat, clap. We have some kicks that sit behind, not only as a build-up, but we have the same kick, quieter, that sits behind our snares. So that's what we're looking at here. And yeah, it's sounding good. Now, moving on to the final part of this update, I wanted to cover the main drop melody, what I did to make it a little bit more creative than where we left off in the last episode, and how you can do this as well. So we were discussing earlier about the full chord structure that we created for the choir that really makes this track what it is. And we created an additional section here where the last 4 bars or so do something different. And this is just a way of refining and editing yourself, making something more musical. People love for a track to tell a story, and being able to take a really good element and say, you know, this is good, but what can I do to just add that next level? And that's creating harmonies, that's creating variation in the melody as it goes along, and you end up telling an even bigger story as it happens. So I will pull up the main melody here, not just the chord structure, but this is one of the layers. So not the full sound, but one of the layers that we've used to make this melody. And you can see mostly the same. But by the time we get to this section, if you compare these notes to these, you can see we're quite obviously, you can see that we're quite obviously doing something different here as it goes up, and you can hear the type of effect this has. Personally, I love it. I think it's awesome. I don't necessarily see this melody changing too much in the final product, if any. I think it really defines the feeling that I was going for. And again, that's just one layer, not the full lead. But the same can be said for other parts here, where I have sort of separated the voices so that we have some really low ones down in the zeros and some high ones up in 3. And of course, our middle prevailing A sharp that we have going on for this melody. Again, something different here. Same melody, different octaves. We're up in the C6s, 5s, 4s. For this particular layer, it's just what ended up sounding the best for this particular synth. We have some parts of the lead, this is what I would call a top lead here. This element is not quite playing the melody, but playing an overarching top sound to what's going on behind it. You can hear this. Now, what you're hearing a lot of too, like I mentioned before, is the sidechain. But another element that you may be hearing are those dips in the volume. Where that's coming from is simply gain automation on the group. I've added a gain plugin that allows me to just fully control the gain of the channel without having to automate the actual volume of the channel. And at least for me, this is one of those just tricks that I've used to save time and to save effort. Because when you can use a plugin to automate gain and avoid having to move the avoid having to move the channel volume, this makes mixdown further along in the process a lot easier, because you're not having to go back and adjust full lanes of automation if you need to adjust the channel volume. You simply use a plugin at the end of your chain to adjust volume. That way, the actual channel volume itself can stay where it needs to stay and can be adjusted later in the mix without affecting the actual effects and intention of the volume that you already had in there. So these gain dips here at the beginning of certain parts are really just a spatial trick. Since the reverb is on this melody group, as you can see here, this is the reverb setup that I detailed in a previous video. But essentially what's happening here is we've put an effects layer on. The reverb is on a separate channel with 100% mix. It's being volume shaped, so it's being scooped out, which is another stereo effect that's happening. But not only that, further down the chain, as you can see here, we're also sidechaining it to itself. So the reverb is dipping in actually three ways. We've got the initial way of shaping it with the beat here. We've got sidechaining it to the actual lead. So when the lead plays, the reverb just takes a step back out of the way of the lead to let it open up a little bit more. And then finally, towards the end of the chain here, which if I just take away my camera briefly, you can see there is a compressor added on to the end here. This is the compressor that is being affected by our ghost chain that's in the kick pattern. So those are the multiple ways that the lead, the reverb on the lead, are being pushed out of the way, are being controlled, so that when those kicks play and when the leads play, everything's kind of glued together in a way that sounds good. So I will play back again the drop here, and we'll take a listen now that you know what's going on.
This ain't nothing to me.
And there you have it. That is the progress so far on this Making Hardstyle from Scratch series. Next time we will cover the screech and how I record out some of that reverb, adding certain types of automation to it that's going to fill it out a little bit more in the track. We will also cover taking out and putting in elements in certain places that allow you to build off of what you've already created, which again, I think is a really important part. But that is all for now. Thank you for watching and have a great day. Bye-bye.